For the past year or so, whenever there's been a fifth Sunday in the month, we've had a word of testimony from someone in our congregation, and it's always wonderful to hear what God is doing in the lives of our brothers and sisters. This time, we will hear from Marcee and Gary Smith. You know Gary because he serves faithfully up here each Sunday to lead us in communion. And Marcee is more of a behind-the-scenes servant. She is a true prayer warrior, and she has this incredibly big heart, and she's inspired to serve the poor in our community. And I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
We are happy to talk today about some opportunities to volunteer at Lakeside Presbyterian Church. It is fun. You'll find out as you give, you get far more back. We hope that after today, each one of you might take the challenge of offering your time in the kitchen, the clothes closet, or with our dispenses. Today, we're going to focus on dispenses because that is what Gary's and my experience is. Some years ago, Gary and I were invited to serve in our dispensa ministry under Marcee. We loved doing it and have had a number of you helping us. The first person that came to help us was Diane Abel. Many of you know her. And then we had Greg and Diane Vogel, who also came. It became more fun. And then when Bev was in the area, she joined us also. You find out as you serve with your brothers and sisters in Christ, it becomes a lot of fun. Gary and I not only packed the dispensas, but we delivered and visited with some of the recipients. More on that later. Gary will talk about some of our experiences. So what is a dispensa? We talk about up north, a dispensary is usually a medical storehouse that gives out medicine. Dispensa in Spanish means pantry or larder. It means food that has shelf life to it, dried foods, canned goods. That's what's in our dispensas, and I'll show you in a minute what we usually include in our dispensas. So who qualifies? Who qualifies for a dispensa? We're very, very careful about that. We visit the home. We check with some of the local people. It might be a school teacher or somebody in the local government of the village, because sometimes we have been misled on who might need a dispensa. Some time ago, when Gary and I were delivering dispensas, we took a bag of dispensa one day, and the woman was an elderly woman, kind of like me, and but she had passed away the night before we arrived with the dispensa. So we left the dispensa, not knowing exactly what the needs were and what was going on with the family, but we noticed over the next 2 months that there were able-bodied adults in that family. So that month when we talked about it, we had observed, we left a note in the dispensa that said, next month will be your last dispensa. We do not give out dispensas to people that can work, have the ability to work. So we're very, very careful about that. We used to have drop-ins at the church, come and get dispensas, and we would log in their names and try to believe their story, but we found it was being abused. There were people that would come from Guadalajara, come down and hit the Presbyterian church, and then the next place that had dispensas, and then the next place that had dispensas, and then return up to Guadalajara for their month's worth of grocery goods. So we do not do that anymore. We have discontinued that. During COVID, we did increase the dispensas because a lot of people lost their jobs or their work. They were laid off. So we did increase it, but we're back to our original number of dispensas, and that is about 85. About 21 to 23 dispensas are packed each week and then given out to the families in need. So what is included in a dispensa? Things like things like oatmeal, milk, oil, rice, things that we'll keep, but things that every family can use. We do include the oil, but we're probably going to back off and not give that every month, because when somebody receives a dispensa and they can't use the items, they sell them, and we really would like to make sure that our dispensas are being used to the fullest. And if you think a dispensa, even for one person, will last a month, no way, no way. And it depends on how many members are in that family, but the majority of the people that Gary and I visited were single, elderly women that either didn't have family locally or had some kind of disagreement within the family. Dad died and left this daughter more than that daughter, or those kind of things that happen in families when there are those kind of changes with a death. So they're usually elderly women that live alone, that don't have the ability to go out and work and really take care of themselves. In the past, we had many donations from you, the congregation. We had somebody send money down and they bought blankets. So every dispensa got a blanket that winter in December. Lydia made cubrebocas when we were just starting out with COVID, and we included those in all the dispensas. Slippers were included, crocheted hats. I can't tell you how much Diane Vogel was busy crocheting that one year. We included crocheted hats in every single dispensa, especially in December and January when it's getting cold. As you all know, we don't have heaters in our houses. It's cold. Gloves were given. I try to shop for gloves during the off cold season and then save them up for the winter months. Hot cocoa mixes, that's something Diane Abel did. She bought the chocolate, can't think of what polvo is, the powdered, thank you, powdered chocolate, and then mixed that with the milk and put little marshmallows in them and put them in little small bags, and we included those in our dispensas. Just fun things, and she would get the urge to bake and make those little small muffins. We would include those. And it's kind of nice when you have shelf-worthy food items to include some of those that are fresh. Travel shampoos and soaps, we will take those. But if you are at this time giving to the prison ministry with those items, please do not divert them to the dispensas. But if you are not giving them anywhere, we would gladly accept them. Fresh foods can be given on Tuesday, just before the Ricardo takes out for delivery. Phyllis has a huge mango tree. She has provided us with mangoes at mango season time, and we've always included those in the dispensa. Loxie brought us the bananas that we included in some of the dispensas, and then I have a large avocado tree so if you have fresh produce, bring them on Tuesday or give them to somebody who can care for them so they don't spoil in the church. We had a lot of fun, not only making the dispensas, but delivering them and visiting and praying with the people, and Gary will tell you more. Then COVID happened, and we were elderly, so we were not allowed to do the deliveries anymore, which was very difficult for Gary and I. Today, we have faithful Tom and Kathy, who pack the dispensas every single Friday that they are able, that they're in town, and they not only pack the dispensas, get them ready for delivery to each family, but they also contribute extra above and beyond in the way of offerings to bulk up the dispensas. Now we are asking for more volunteers to break down the costales from the abastos into individual bags. Do you know what a costal is? It's like a big gunny sack, where you can buy 50 kilos of beans or rice or whatever. That's what a costal is. And we're going to get them, Martina is going to make them available to us on Tuesdays beginning this week at 10 o'clock. And we're going to try to figure out how to break those down into smaller bags and prepare them for the Friday making of the dispensa bags. So we need workers on that, 10 o'clock on Tuesday. We're not sure, it's brand new to us, so we won't have the system totally perfected, but we'll get it figured out, and we'll also have fun doing it. The other help that we could use in the dispensas is making the deliveries. You don't have to speak Spanish to have a smile, to have a hug for somebody. If you do speak Spanish, use the few words that you do know. They appreciate the visit. Ricardo will do all the driving, so you don't have to worry about having a vehicle or knowing where to deliver them, because as Gary and I know, sometimes the addresses are quite misleading and difficult to find. But Ricardo knows. He's been doing it all during COVID, and he will do the driving and the hauling, so you don't have to worry about being able to pick up the bag. But we would like help with the deliveries. Okay, Gary will now share some of our experiences in delivering the dispensas during the years that we were doing it.
Good morning. You've heard the term the better half. I truly have the better half. No, I mean that very seriously. Many dispenser recipients, people that we would go to visit, do not have what you and I would consider passable or decent housing. I don't know how many of you have been in a Mexican home, particularly a lower class home I'm talking about. At times we would not even be able to visit inside because there would be no room. There were only beds in one room and pretty much took up the whole place, and you went in the door and that was it. Often on entering in minimal space, and I did an estimate the other day in my head, probably 10 by 14 would be maybe the main primary room in the house. Now, I don't know that that's accurate. I'm talking feet now, of course. I don't know how accurate that is. It might have, the house, this will shock you. Some homes were actually constructed, in our opinion, out of carton or carton. Others cinder block. You go in the door and what do you find? Perhaps there was a bed, some tables, a chair, perhaps a tiny stove, family pictures, religious pictures, statues. You can imagine the Catholicism. A small couch if they were on the upper end of the things. And out back, perhaps there was a garden, or actually more often there was a small garden for food because that was part of their sustenance rather than having to go to the Abastos or the corner store. And most all the time, we would leave, without a doubt, and Marcee will agree with this, more blessed for having gone to them and served them and brought something to them than they did. We walked out of there God just gave to us in an incredible way. They smiled, their hugs, which never failed, and they would give us little gifts on occasion in order to just make them feel good, and we really learned to love them. I would like to describe for you 4 different people that are fairly representative, and I think you will find it most interesting. The first person that I'm going to talk about, her name was Lucy. Now, I don't know if it was Lucella or whatever, but we knew her by Lucy. She was, at the time, 60 years old, and she had had a stroke about 20 years previous. And most often when we would come through the door, she would be clutching a stuffed animal. She cannot talk, or could not talk. She could not walk. Couldn't sit up without being propped up without some form of help. Her husband was a gardener, and he would be often gone and looking for jobs, and they would be very sporadic, so there was no constant income stream whatsoever. So he was often gone from the home when we arrived. But knowing, Mexicans are sharp people, they know how to figure things out. He figured out a way that we could get into the home safely and be able, when he was gone, to see Lucy and to deliver things. Often Lucy would be sitting up on the sofa, and the front door would be open sometimes, and she'd be looking out on the street. And I believe that the only joy or stimulation in her life she had would be just to watch the cars going back and forth and maybe an occasional person walking down the street. It was pretty incredible. The house wasn't always clean. On a few occasions, there would be excrement on the floor. And a few occasions on this. This was not the norm. There would also be rotten food and many flies on that. It was generally untidy. So we came with the dispenser, and she would break into the biggest smile that you would think that she just won the $10 million lottery when we came with that. Marcee learned something very quickly about Lucia. She learned to remove her earrings before we went in to visit. And that was because Lucy loved baubles, anything that was shiny and glittery. So Lucy would pull on Marcee. If Marcee didn't think to remove them, she would pull on Marcee's earrings and then immediately ask if she could have them. Lucy was great. She couldn't talk, but she surely could communicate. They had 2 children, and they lived in Guadalajara. They were ashamed of her. I don't understand that. And they only visited a couple times a year. And one time when we arrived, we noticed something very peculiar. Lucy's head was shaved. It was completely bald. Well, we didn't quite know what to make of that, and we just went on with our normal delivery, and Marcee's sitting next to her, and Lucy had a desire to touch Marcee's face and her hair and touch her, and so what? But it dawned on us later that Lucy had head lice. Remember, she's been touching Marcee all over the place. Fortunately, thank you, Lord, Marcee did not receive any of the little critters, and nothing happened. But she was a precious person. That's Lucy. Next person I'd like to talk to you about is Maria Feliz. Now, I don't think her last name was Feliz, but if you translate Maria Feliz into Spanish, it's Happy Mary. And it sure did describe that person. She was as sweet as can be. When you would walk up to her and see her, you would only see 3 teeth in the front. I have no idea, I don't think Marcee does, if she had any in the sides or the back. But one day when we went there, Marcee offered her toothpaste and a toothbrush. And Maria Feliz just cracked up with the loudest howl and laughter that you can imagine, because she's thinking of the 3 front teeth and the toothbrush, the paste, and she just thought that was a real hoot. She lived alone with 2 large, very unruly, and friendly dogs, approximately 14 chickens, and Marcee had a count of 20 cats. I disputed that. I thought it was fewer, but hey, she's probably right. One time we had arrived and she had fallen, not then, but previously during the week or whatever, and her face was torn up and black and blue, and just, it was very sad to see. Fortunately, she did get medical care. She always was wearing the same house dress. I don't recall a time, I don't think Marcee does, that she was wearing a different dress than the one we would see her in. Her front yard was a tangle of weeds and virtually impassable. If you want to go to her back door, you literally had to pass through what we would call a junkyard or an obstacle course to traverse in order to get into the back door. It was incredible. It was basically up an alley, and then there was this rusted metal door and the animals, and you couldn't even get through it. It was about that wide. Now, you've seen Marcee's tall. She's just a squeak shorter than I am. Well, Maria Feliz was about half Marcee. No exaggeration. And probably, if you, matching girth, meaning extremely thin. She had local siblings, but there was some kind of unresolved conflicts between she and them, so they were estranged. I can't imagine it with her personality. We would arrive at the back fence and knock on the junkyard door, that's really the tin door, calling her, and she would yell out, "Ya me voy," which means in Spanish, "Here I come." And sure enough, we'd hear things moving and the dogs come flying out, and Maria Feliz would pop through the door, and we'd be standing there kind of in the alley. And 2 friendly dogs, 2 of them would jump up on us and practically knock us over. And she'd come out through the gate, and she'd be loaded, her arms would be loaded with chayotes. You know what chayotes are. And that was her way, not every time, to say, "Thank you, I appreciate you." Because I'm sure it made her feel better to not always be receiving. They grew wild in the junkyard. So there were always, without fail, large smiles of welcome, and we would pray with her in Spanish and receive generous hugs. I don't remember a time that we walked out of there without multiple hugs and her chayote gifts. And she was always joyous, never failed to be joyous to see her. And she gave us more in value, more in human warmth than the value of the things. that we gave her. It was incredible. Since then, she's passed away. Next person I'd like to share with you, only two to go. His name was Emilio Porras Cordillero. And he was a grandfather, and he was left raising 4 children. Now think of that, just an elderly man and 4 younger kids. The kids' ages were, we believe, 4, 9, and either 12 and 13 or 2 and 12. And when we met Emilio, he was overwhelmed with having to raise, and you can imagine this, 4 kids with an elderly fellow, the grandchildren. His wife had died the year before, and the children's mother had left them. She had literally just abandoned them. So here he has to do this. Shortly before the visit, his son died. He lived in a cement block structure that actually was below street level. And when it rained real hard, the house would flood. He was always so thankful when he received the gifts from us. One time we took school uniforms and shoes, and the cost for him would have been prohibitive, and that took that burden off of his shoulders. Just before the COVID pandemic hit, he got a job driving a school bus for children with special needs. And unfortunately, because of that income level that did raise, that made it necessary to terminate the dispenses. And last person I'd like to share with you, his name was older couple named Gregoria and Guadalupe. Now, Gregoria, the woman, had a nickname by the neighbor kids, and I don't know if the neighbor families, the adults or not, but it was Changuita. Well, if you translate that into Spanish, that's little monkey. In no way did she resemble a little monkey, I don't know where that came from, but it was a term of endearment. Our son would call it terms of deer meat. We have a kid with a great 50 years old, but he's got a great sense of humor. Anyway, they were elderly, but they were not infirm as far as we were able to tell. And they always, amongst all the people that we would see, asked us, almost demanded us that we would pray with them, which was just a real blessing for us to be able to do. When we would hold hands in a little circle out in front of the house on the dusty, dirty street and pray, and the lake would be lapping at the floor and the walls of the Carton house. It was constant prayer, and it was expected by them. And that was really wonderful. The husband would go out daily to search for work, but given the fact that he was elderly, not too many people offered, payment for his work. His son had addiction problems, but thankfully he did not live with them because he would have bled them dry. He offered absolutely nothing in the way of support to his parents. They had a cow, which provided milk, of course, and it also provided fuel for the fire. Now you can think on how that came about. A little bit of sun dries it out, and there's your fuel. Gregoria, had eye problems, and my suspicion, I don't know if this matches Marcee's, but when cars would go down the dirt street in front, and it was just pure dirt, it would throw up clouds of dust, and I suspect there was enough of that got in their eyes that caused that irritation. The neighborhood children really liked to hang with her, and I guess that's probably where the name came from, but they loved her dearly, and I could see why. And if we forgot to pray, she would ask, "Why are we not praying?" That would always make her day. Not so much that we would forget, but sometimes she would just get to it before we were, ready to do it. But we considered it a tremendous privilege to know these people, to be able to serve them in a small way, and we just ask that you consider it, and God sure blessed us for that. So thank you so much for your time and your patience.
Oh, still a little more.
Good.
Sorry. Let's take out our little bulletin insert. It's pink. Let's start with the kitchen, the middle one. Rosana Magana is the La Jefa. Rosana, most of you know, she's sitting over that way. She has suggested that we can bring our yogurt containers. If you buy fruit or little tomatoes in the clear containers, maybe you could buy some covers for them before they're donated, because they put like soup and hot foods in them to distribute. She's also suggested that they can use help chopping vegetables, and I kind of think we've already got somebody doing that. Is that weekly? Maybe? No? No. Well, maybe we don't. But teach the cooks how to make a dish. Maybe a fairly simple dish. I was thinking maybe I could teach them how to make Rice Krispie bars. You know, that's done on the stovetop. Pretty simple. You don't have to have a lot of ingredients. Also, she's suggested that they have a devotional time while cooking together. Isn't that a wonderful idea? I think Rosanna Gustavo is the one who pretty much runs the kitchen. Is that correct? Yeah, but she's still the jefa. She's still the chief, the big cheese. The clothing closet is upstairs, and that is the chief of that is Karina, the wife of Martine. And they come in, she and another gal come in on every Tuesday from 10:30 to 1, and they sort clothes. They check to see with the donations if they need washing, but they sort them down by the type of clothing that they are, so that when they're building bags to take out and distribute, they can pull the right kind of clothes, whether they're large, women's, men's, or children. We do not give, in our clothing closet, we do not give out used underwear. So if you're in a store and you want to buy the brand new underwear for ladies, men, children, those can also be contributed to the clothes closet. And they can always use hangers, and of course plastic bags. Plastic bags are not that common anymore because we all use our cloth bags, but plastic bags for deliveries. And also, if you're driving from Canada or the US and you can buy secondhand clothes up north, apparently Martine tells me that clothes are much cheaper up in the US than they are down here. Even though in the tianguis you can sure get a big bag of clothes for not a whole lot of pesos. And then the top one is the despensas. We do need help packing the beans, lentils, rice from the costales, and deliveries. If you're interested in helping with the deliveries, again, Ricardo will be doing the driving, so you don't have any of that on you. And of course, you can buy and donate food items on a weekly basis. We'll have a box in the back where you can bring and donate. Even if you do not live here year-round, we would love to have you join us in any ministry and outreach. We can use you for 2 weeks. We can use you for 3 months. It's fun. We miss, in the past when we had Greg and Diane working with us, we missed them when they went back. You make friends. It's a lot of fun. There are 3 areas that you can volunteer to serve, and I do have some sign-up sheets out by the front there if you want to leave your name, your email, and your phone number. You'll find out that you are going to be blessed. We're really asking for donation of time, but if you don't have the time and want to donate money, we're asking that you keep that separate from your tithe. Consider this an offering above and beyond your tithe so that we don't ding the regular budget. So I encourage us, let's go out, have fun, and share God's love through our outreach ministries. The kitchen, the clothes closet, the dispensas, you will be blessed. Thank you, Martine, for helping me with this.